This is Democracy Watch. Marc, we have some major news here. There's a hearing happening today on Doge's access to the Treasury. This has obviously been an issue that has gripped the entire country for good reason. We shouldn't have random unelected bureaucrats with no oversight having access to all of our private secure information, including social security numbers. I'm going to put a tweet up here on the screen from Kyle Cheney from Politico. Judge Kolar Kotelly seems prepared to block Musk's two Doge allies, detailed to Treasury, from sharing any Treasury records with Musk or others outside the department. She wants a filing from DOJ by tonight to see if the government will agree to that plan. So can you give an overview of what we're looking at right now and whether this ruling, even against Doge, will actually be successful at stopping him from doing whatever he wants to do? And he hasn't seemed to be prevented from, nothing has seemed to prevent him from doing what he wants in the past.
Yeah, so this is a very important lawsuit brought by a number of labor unions, as you say, trying to protect the privacy rights of individuals and others who are in these databases, these massive databases in the federal government, this one in the Treasury Department. And, Brian, you and I, talk occasionally off air, and, you once said to me that you're getting flooded with people who are worried that their information is being accessed. And so are we at Democracy Docket. And I understand why, right? I mean, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Americans count on the federal government in one form or another to send them either Social Security checks or disability checks. And they're in this database. I mean, all of us, frankly, are in this database, and they're concerned. What does it mean that not unelected bureaucrats, but really, cronies? I mean, these are people, some of whom apparently are barely out of high school, who, are rummaging around these big databases. And we are to assume that they both have good intentions, but also, Brian, that they know what they're doing, that they don't inadvertently, share this information or corrupt this data in a way that means people don't get their money, or that there's, a security risk to people having access to it. So this lawsuit was filed, very important lawsuit. We're seeing a lot of really important litigation being filed. So kudos here to this one, saying, look, this is a real problem. And the Judge Kolar Kotelly, I've appeared before her. She's a very serious and thoughtful judge. I think she was appointed by President Obama, if I recall. And she is raising the right question, which is, what is the access that has been granted, and who is it shared with? And she is focused in on this particular court order on that second question, which is, all right, so you got these people detailed to the Treasury Department. That's still put a footnote in that. We ought to at some point, when crisis is averted, we ought to come back to that. But all right, but where does it get shared? And there is no reason, if they are detailed to the Department of Treasury, it should leave the Department of Treasury. And so the question will be, what will the federal government do? What will the Department of Justice do? And my prediction is they are going to hedge. They're going to hedge, because this goes to your point, Brian. Why does it feel like, Donald Trump and issued these illegal executive orders? You have Musk doing all this stuff, and it feels like a game of cat and mouse. Judge says no, and then they kind of take it in a slightly different direction, yet it doesn't seem like anything changes. And that is because the Department of Justice lawyers are hedging, and they are thinking that they can game this system, and they're going to be on the wrong end of a judge. And maybe it'll this case, one of the other cases, where they will have made a big mistake and they will land themselves in a whole lot of trouble before that judge.
Marc, what happens in the event that they're already doing what the judge is going to preclude them from doing? It seems like what they're doing is moving as quick as they can and then asking not for permission, but for forgiveness after the fact. So isn't the toothpaste out of the tube at this point? Aren't if they're going in right now and getting the information that they want to get and gaining access to everything without asking anybody, but just kind of shoehorning their way in, aren't we litigating an issue that we're already a few steps behind on?
So yes and no. So look, I have been a big proponent of litigation to protect democracy. And I've been a big proponent of the litigation that you're seeing going on right now. These cases, I'm not lawyering them, but they're being well lawyered by a lot of different groups, and kudos to the folks who are bringing them. But I've also always pointed out that the problem with some of these cases is what you said, is that you plug one hole in the dike that's leaking water, and it just pops up someplace else, right? The legislature passes another law. They move to a different agency. They switch personnel. It's no longer these two people. It's now two other people. It's no longer DOJ is no longer an advisory committee. It's taken over an agency. You and I did a very important video. I hope people watch. Where court issues an order that says, the OMB directive has to be blocked. They retract the directive, and then what happens? The White House press secretary issues a tweet that says, but it's still in force. So then you have to go back to court. So look, I understand that frustration, but the reason why I keep emphasizing the role of the federal judges here and these lawyers at the Department of Justice is that at some point, one or more of these federal judges is going to lose their patience. They're going to feel like what you just said is happening is being done on purpose. It's not that the horse is out of the barn, but that essentially the Department of Justice lawyers are running interference. And at that point, you will see these judges come down like a ton of bricks, either on the defendant agencies or on the lawyers before them. And I got to tell you, you and I have talked and others have said, we need the good lawyers at the Department of Justice not to leave. Yeah, but we also need the good lawyers at the Department of Justice to be straight with the judges. And, I'm not going to say that any one lawyer in any one case has not been straight, but some of the answers they seem to be giving are either heavily qualified or are calculated in a way to enable what you're talking about. But I think we're going to see an end of that soon.
I want to game this out a little bit. You mentioned that the judges would eventually get frustrated if they feel like they're being played and would come down like a ton of bricks. In a normal instance of litigation, that we would be in contempt territory, right? But what really is the consequence for a federal government at the hands of a judge who may be getting frustrated?
Yeah, so I wanna make this part of a broader point, which is that Donald Trump abused the judicial system when he was a candidate, right? He abused the criminal justice system and was able to game it. And
by the way, that's what's informing a lot of my thoughts about the inability of the justice system to actually stand up to Donald Trump.
Yeah, and so look, I was a critic of the way Merrick Garland and his lawyers handled it. I thought they were insufficiently aggressive, and I was, by the way, critical of the judges who I thought were too deferential. But here, this situation is slightly different. On the one hand, judges are trained, not literally trained, but mentally trained, to give government lawyers the benefit of the doubt. The assumption is that when a government lawyer comes in and makes a representation, that they are doing so in good faith and that they are to be believed. I think we need judges to stop doing that. Honestly, we needed judges to not do that in some of the cases where they were giving that benefit of the doubt to Donald Trump's legal team because they were representing a former president. But that definitely has to stop now. But if that happens, where the judges lose the confidence that they are being told the truth by these lawyers, what they can do is, number one, they can hold the lawyers in contempt. Number two, they can hold the government agency in contempt. And for a lawyer to be held in contempt also threatens their bar license. Yeah. So, there are parts of this that can start to become quite personal to the people who are caught in the crossfires. And then you will start to see the lawyers back away from some of these assertions. But the other thing the judges can do, and this, I think, is really critical. And we saw this in the spending cases, not in the first order, not in the second court's order, but in the third order, where the judge issued a very broad order, right? No longer was the judge just going to issue a ban that was covering OMB. No longer was it just covering certain agency spending, but it was a government-wide covered order that said whether it is an OMB directive or coming from the White House or is in any form or fashion trying to freeze the spending, it is prohibited. So you're going to start to see judges expand the way in which they issue their orders to head off this kinds of gamesmanship. And Judge Kolar-Catelli is a very smart judge. She is a very, I think, probably understands what's going on here. And so I would expect if the Department of Justice comes back with anything other than an absolute yes, ma'am, you're going to see a very aggressive order.
Well, look, you have said from the very beginning that the courts are going to play an especially important role in defending democracy right now, and that is something that you cover better than anybody else with Democracy Docket, which is the news outlet you founded to focus on everything voting and elections. It is an amazing resource, and I use it on a daily basis. Highly recommend for anybody watching right now. Please make sure to sign up if you are not yet signed up. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.